I am moved. Time and time again, I'm moved by your singing, girl. Thank you so much for being so wonderful. So we are in this season of cultivating faith. And we're in that season because we chose to be in that season, so yay. Now here's what I know. Or at least here's what I've experienced. I don't know that I know anything. You see that? I'm getting smarter and smarter as the years go by, that I realize, well, I don't know nothing, you know? In fact, we were talking about some young students who graduated from the School of Ministry, and they're all excited, and they know, you know, they're ready to take on the world. And I'm like, oh, God, I long for those days when I knew everything. I long for those days when ministry made so much sense. But no, you know, then you step into life. But one of the things that I've realized is very often that when we set a new intention, that which is like that which we have declared comes up. So you're saying, well, I made this intention, I've set this goal, I've done this thing because I'm ready to be prosperous, right? And then, lo and behold, if some unexpected expense doesn't show up, or lo and behold, your job changes form, and it doesn't include you as a part of it anymore. I've been through that, right? Or some other thing happens, you're like, but wait a minute. Uncle Marty said that if I just practiced these principles, and if I did my affirmations and did my daily prayer, then all things would just unfold perfectly, and I would live happily ever after. I just want to go on record. I never said that. I cannot be responsible for what you hear, but I never said that. But the idea that we speak of time and time again is that we have a power, that we live in the midst of a creative energy. We can call that God or life or spirit or Joe. It doesn't really matter. But what we know is that it is always unfolding, and that we are co-creative beings with that power through the power of our thought, our word, our belief, which leads to our actions. So when we often make this declaration, some new declaration for ourselves, or set a new intention, then it's almost as if sometimes, I always call it the "Are you sure" button of the universe, right? Like in the olden days, I don't know if this still happens, but in the olden days when I was about to do something stupid on my computer, it would come up with this little screen that says, "You're about to delete all your files. Are you sure?" I was grateful for that many times, right? And you go, well, maybe you don't, right? So it's almost like the universe has this "Are you sure" button that says, I am committed to living a life being a spiritual being. Are you sure? Because I'm going to let's just find out where your commitment is. Because here's a situation. What are you committed to? And sometimes when those situations arrive, we have the opportunity to look at where we are fearful. You see, it's a wonderful thing to know that our lives are created through our own being. Now, I don't want to get too carried away. I don't want to say that we are responsible for everything that happens, but what we do know is that as we are developing consciousness is reflecting itself in our outer life. And then situations happen. You know, I always like to check in on the news any given morning, just if something radical has happened on a Sunday morning, I like to be aware of it. And so I woke up this morning to find out that we are going to make peace with North Korea and we're at war with Canada. Who knew? You know, didn't expect that. Yeah. No, I just, this is a wonderful time to be practicing our faith, is it not? Oh, gosh. So, some of us, I've heard, live in fear from time to time. I just heard that. I'm not sure, nobody named names or anything, but there's a rumor going around that some of us are living in fear from time to time. I was shocked as well, since I've never done that, right? But I've also know that that's okay. You see, when we begin to really understand how this stuff works, it all becomes so simple, doesn't it? And I have to say, I'm so grateful for my faith. I'm so grateful that I can live and be at peace a lot of the time. And when I move out of that peaceful state, I know how to get back to it. Amen. Right? Amen. It's the same thing. We talk about spiritual practice because that implies it's a more than a one-shot deal. Right? So when we're in a fearful state, it feels real. Right? I always often think about a time I went camping, and in the middle of the night, I heard little creepy crawly things outside, and I could see the shadow. And since we were in bear territory, I knew that there was a bear. Great. This is how the story ends. Who knew, right? I mean, so that night I slept very lightly, deeply afraid. And what I found out in the morning is that some squirrels had visited the campsite, but it just so happened that there was a trash can that was shadowing on the tent, so I could see this big, scary object out there. Now, you can say, well, that wasn't real, but it was real for me. My eyes were open, right? See, that's the thing. Our fear feels real. We have a response to something. And it's all part of a divinely designed idea that we have capacities. You see, it's a helpful thing, this idea of the fear or flight thing that we have in us, that we've had for part of our evolution into humanity. That when danger occurs, there's a response and it kicks in the adrenaline and we go to action. The problem that I see is that we don't have to deal with saber-toothed tigers so much anymore, right? We don't have to deal with some of those fears, and so sometimes that same emotional response we're playing out. And then, if we engage our creative imagination, called worry, the thing we fear, we visualize. And as it says in Job, that which I feared the most has come upon me. A little statement of metaphysical truth. You see, when we understand that worry is not preparation, but rather it is an engagement of our mind, we can stop. So how do we get out of it? I was reminded of this morning, I was thinking about David and Goliath and some of these classic stories. And we all know the story of David and Goliath, of this young man who wasn't being taken seriously, having to go against the biggest, toughest, baddest warrior that the Philistines had, Goliath. And he was a snorting, scratching kind of guy, right? And kept taunting the Israelites. Get out here. Come on, I'll take you on, right? And so this thing ensued, and so they thought, well, we have to have the biggest, baddest warrior on our team. But the problem was nobody wanted to do it. Who wants to do that, right? But this young man came along, and David said, I'll do it. Little scrawny guy, right? Everyone's like, you can't do that. You're young, you're inexperienced. It's like, I know my stuff. I know how to sling a slingshot. I know I've fought bears and tigers better than this. I'll do it. But you see, here's part of the story that we don't often hear. There's several components of it. One is that there was a promise made. So the king said, hey, one of you Israelites got to do this. And so here's the deal. If you will do this and you will win, I will give you riches beyond measure. I will give you a kingdom. And I'm going to throw in my daughter. Which is back in the days when you could do that. Not really accepted very much anymore, but hey. So David It's like, sweet, right? There's a deal. Money, kingdom, hot lady, I'm assuming. I don't know, but I'm going to make it a better story. Hot gal, right? Sweet. And all I got to do is take out this guy. So finally convinces the king to let him do it. And the king then comes back to him and says, okay, well, if you're going to do this, then what we need to do is we need to get you in some armor. We got the best armor. We got the king's armor. We're going to drape you in this armor so that when you go out to fight, you're good. And yet, what do we know? He couldn't move, right? He was safe, but he couldn't move. Hint, here's a hint. Sometimes our safety is the thing that is preventing our movement forward. So he said, sorry, I'm not going to do it. Now, day comes, big guy, snorting and scratching inappropriately, and doing all the things that he did to intimidate our little David. And David does what he does. He brought forth his gift, and he takes the stone and he slings it. It hits the Goliath in the head, and he knocks him out and goes and cuts off his head. Ta-da! Winner became King David. Got the kingdom, got the girl, got the whole story. Right? So here's the lesson. Mary Morrissey talks about this. I love her interpretation. But the idea is that when the people were in fear, all they saw was big, bad Goliath. But what David saw was the girl, the money, the kingdom. And all he had to do is get that dude out of the way. And he had the skills, he had the God-given abilities to make it so. It's a great story. What does it have to do with you and I? Well, one of the things I know is so often when we move into a state of fearfulness, we begin to elevate the problem. And it becomes this giant, right? Isn't that how we hear about David and the giant? Right? It becomes this giant thing. And the more we live in fear about it, the bigger it gets, the badder it gets, the tougher it gets. Until we have some moment of saying enough, and we do what we do. We take our God-given gifts and bring them into the world. Now, is there risk? Yes. Was David ever at risk? Yes, absolutely. So I'd love to tell you there's a risk-free option for moving through your fear. But what we need to do, there's some great passages in this Bible reading if you ever want to do it, but that faith in God being bigger than the problem. I think as Mary Morrissey also says, I need to stop telling telling God how big my problems are, and start telling my problems how big my God is. Right? You see, there's nothing that any one of us faces in our lives that we aren't perfectly capable of dealing with. But fear allows us to move into a consciousness, into a state of being that believes that the thing we fear is real. Why do we believe it? Because it feels real. The bear that tried to kill me that night was as real as it could be until I was able to get outside of the tent and see that it was a trash can. Right? Not the brightest, not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but it was real. That's the thing. It feels real. So I don't want to diminish if you have a fear of something or you have a phobia or you have something. I'm not diminishing. It feels real. But what I am saying to you is there is a power greater than the fear. And it is a power of faith. What we want to do is we want to look at the thing. What is the problem? You see, sometimes in metaphysics and unity, we can't ever say anything negative. Oh no, don't say anything negative. Don't address the issue. That just makes it real. No, that just acknowledges that it's sitting there, right? So it's okay to express the problem, to look at the problem, but not be consumed by the problem. It's just a reflection of a current state of being. And then we ask ourselves, what is it that I want to happen? What is it that I hope to have happen? What is it that I desire? And when we get clear on that, we can recognize what quality of God am I seeking to express here? And then I go to work to remove that sense of separation that I'm holding within myself. I forgive myself and anyone else that I perceive has harmed me. And then I can begin to move forward in the prayer of faith. So what does that look like? It's very abstract. But let's say finances. You look at your checkbook, although not, or however you look at what used to be called checkbooks, that's not what I had hoped it to be. And then you hear that little voice. You know the one that predicts your doom and gloom and the end of your life and how you're going to be homeless. It's like, how did I go from, right? Because that's just the unquestioned thing. And it may trigger something within us that happened to us at a young age that taught us that there's not enough, taught us that we had to struggle, taught us that we had to overcome, or even taught us that only rich people are evil, or some other silly idea. Rich people are just people. Some of them are nice, some of them aren't. The money is not really the factor, right? It's a wonderful thing. So we look at that and we say, as we're releasing that, so you recognize, I have a fear of lack. I have a fear of limitation. Ultimately, it's saying, I'm not powerful enough to handle this situation, right? Isn't that what fear is always saying to us? I'm not powerful enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy. Fear is always speaking to some limiting belief that we hold. And it may be ingrained, it may have emotional attachment, it may have a lot of things behind it, but it's still not real. And so we say, I release my belief in lack. I release my need to control, or whatever it is your need is. I release Marcia's worksheet here. I release my need, and I am grateful to God for the wealth that I am. You see, I'm addressing the situation. I'm making it. But I'm recognizing it's a belief. So I release that belief. I release the need to have things be different, and I move back into the awareness of who I am. You see, you will hear me, if you come every Sunday, you will hear me say over and over and over, you are connected with the divine. You are an expression of God itself. You are powerful. And the limit to our power is not that you didn't get the full measure. It's the belief that there's a limit to our power. Isn't that amazing? So if we can change the belief, we can have the experience we desire. So what I've come to appreciate over a period of time is that those places where I'm holding fear are also pointing those places where I have limiting beliefs. And if I cannot get attached to the emotional piece of it, to let it drive me, to let it make me stay awake all night in a tent, but rather I could have gone out and taken a peek. Oh, look, it's a scary trash can. It was a scary, let's, in all fairness to me, it was a scary looking trash can. Right? But I don't think my life was in danger. Then we can address the issue and we can move forward. You see, we have a power. And I don't want to minimize this. I don't want to just say all you got to do is change your thought. But at one level, all you got to do is change your thought. And yet it may be attached to other thoughts, and there may be a consciousness, and there may be some conditioning, and there may have been some practice. Many of us have been practicing our limiting belief for some time. And we have been demonstrating it so that now not only do we have the belief, but we have evidence to support our belief, which is cool because then we get to be right. Yay, broke, but right. You know, lonely, but right, whatever. Just going, so what if I began to work to identify the limitation, be willing to release it, and then in the releasing comes the replacement, where we literally use the same energy, only in a positive way. The fear is a negative emotion in the sense that we're using it in a negative fashion. But when we can see that what's behind that is the opportunity, and begin to place our faith in what we want, as David did, he didn't see that big guy. He saw the beautiful princess and the money and the kingdom. And he said, all I got to do is have one stone. Well, cut off his head too, but that's, but it was the stone that got the whole thing rolling. Don't you love those stories? They're so kid-friendly. Right when you think, I digress, I'm not going to go there. But really, when you think about it sometimes, you read the story and you go, ooh, that was, okay. All right. So we have the power. So faith, whether we place our power in the fear or whether we place our power in the faith, it is us doing the work. And so don't be afraid of fear. It's counterproductive. Just acknowledge it. And then look at what's the belief behind it. And then begin to replace the belief, the limiting belief, with the belief and what you want. I pulled from my archives, many of you have heard this, but there's a wonderful thing that Jesus did. There are a lot of wonderful things, but one of the things he did is when his disciples came to him and said, teach us how to pray. And he did. And it's been evolved in many ways, but Rocco Errico wrote this translation from the Aramaic. And I want to close with that today, and then we'll move into our prayer. It says this, Our Father, which even in this translation should be understood that the closest relationship between a male, or in the time in which he lived, the closest relationship was that between the father and the firstborn son. But his use of this term is really more like Papa. It's a very sweet, endearing term. We'll use that. Papa, who is throughout the universe. Let your name be set apart. Come your kingdom or your counsel. Let your desire be as in the universe, also on earth. Give us bread for our necessities this day, and free us from our offenses, as also we have freed our offenders. And do not let us enter our temptation, our worldliness, but set us free from error. For belongs to you the kingdom, the power, and the song, from ages to ages, sealed in faithfulness. Let us enter into that awareness of that divine presence. And let us remember that it is this one life, this one power, this one being, expressing in and through and as all creation. That as we are willing to release our sense of separation or our belief in separation, we know what is true. That the truth is we live, move, and have our very being in this divine presence, the presence of love, of peace, of joy, of harmony, of wholeness, of abundance. This is our divine inheritance. This is who we are. And so as we speak this word of truth this day, we are doing so from that awareness that that which we seek is already provided. And so we are willing to release those limitations, those worn out ideas, to embrace the fullness and the divine power of who we truly are. We know that we are abundant beings because we participate in divine flow. And so we joyously give and graciously receive of the divine bounty. We know that wholeness is the order of the day, that wholeness expresses itself as our health, as our well-being, as our vitality. We know that love is indeed the only reality. And so we choose love over all options. We fully and freely forgive ourselves. We fully and freely forgive those who we have perceived that have harmed us. And we enter into that state of knowing that recognizes our power. Just as David recognized there was something greater than the obstacle that stood in front of him, so too do we know that seeming obstacle is but an entryway into the larger life. And so we move forward with faith, with grace, with deep and profound awareness. And so it is with a sense of joy and gratitude that we give thanks. It is with a sense of joy and gratitude that we bless this spiritual community. It is with a sense of joy and gratitude that we bless the world in which we live, that we hold the high consciousness for a world at peace. And as always, we bless all priests, all rabbis, ministers, teachers of all faiths, for we know there are many pathways to the divine, and therefore we honor and celebrate them all. In joy and gratitude, then, I simply speak this word of truth. I release it into that Christic power that causes all things to be. I name it good and very good, as together we say, and so it is. Amen.